All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
To end the conflict, his envoy, Steve Witkoff, is visiting Moscow today. Trump added that new sanctions could be imposed on Russia. Ukraine and Russia are exchanging fire on multiple fronts. Bridges are being destroyed, cities are burning, and oil depots are under attack. At least 7 people were injured in a missile strike, while 2 others were hospitalized, and 23 private homes, 12 apartment buildings, and a post office suffered damage.
Russian artillery lit up the skies over Vovchansk, pounding Ukrainian front lines in a storm of shells. But within seconds, the battlefield turned silent, not from a ceasefire, but because Ukrainian electronic warfare trucks flooded the airwaves, jamming fire control and blinding Russian gunners. What followed wasn't just a counterattack, it was a multi-domain ambush. Drones, submarines, and fighters tearing apart Russia's base from every direction. So how did Ukraine collapse an entire forward command post overnight? And why did Moscow's northeastern offensive fall apart in less than 72 hours? Stick with us and see. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. A Russian base built to anchor an entire offensive was reduced to silence in less than 72 hours. How did Ukraine achieve this so quickly? The story unfolded at Vovchansk, a small town near the northeastern border that had become a battlefield more than a community. Russia threw in a brigade-sized attack, a formation large enough to overwhelm defenses on the ground. Dozens of artillery pieces opened fire.
Ukraine and Russia are exchanging fire on multiple fronts. Bridges are being destroyed, cities are burning, and oil depots are under attack. At least 7 people were injured in a missile strike, while 2 others were hospitalized, and 23 private homes, 12 apartment buildings, and a post office suffered damage.
To Russia launching a massive aerial assault against Ukraine, the biggest since the invasion more than 3 years ago.
Their shells landing in rapid succession across trenches and urban cover, where Ukrainian troops were dug in. The sound of those barrages was constant, rolling in waves that made communication on the front almost impossible. Entire blocks shook under the pounding, and Russia made it clear they intended to split open the northeast flank and use the town as a forward springboard. For a moment, it looked as if Ukraine would be forced to abandon its positions. The firepower Russia brought forward was heavy and coordinated, not just in numbers but in timing. Each strike seemed calibrated to force Ukrainian units back before they could regroup. Tanks moved behind this wall of artillery, and infantry carriers followed, giving the impression of overwhelming strength. Every previous offensive in this area had stalled, but this time Moscow doubled the effort. Ukrainian defenders could see that if the Russian wedge broke through, larger forces waiting behind them could push directly into Kharkiv region with momentum.
Biggest Russian drone and missile attack of the war. Ukraine says Moscow fired 550 drones and 11 missiles overnight.
Kharkiv, Kherson, and Mykolaiv have reported injuries from Russian attacks.
All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
That pressure made the next move even more startling. Within seconds, Ukrainian electronic warfare vehicles rolled into position and began transmitting bursts of interference that cut through Russian communications. Fire control networks used to coordinate artillery suddenly went silent. Spotters at Russian gun positions, who had been passing adjustments to crews, found their radios useless, filled with static. Batteries on the Russian side tried to keep up their shelling, but with no data, their accuracy plummeted. What looked like an unstoppable barrage broke apart as shells scattered far from targets. At the same moment, small drones hovered overhead, relaying constant video back to Ukrainian operators. These drones showed the live positions of Russian gun teams, now fumbling without working communication links. Crews who had been hidden beneath camouflage and netting were lit up on operators' screens, giving Ukraine a chance to map every artillery position in real time. With fire support fading into confusion, Russian formations became visible outlines on drone feeds and not the coordinated mass they had started as. The battlefield did not end on land. From beneath the Black Sea surface, Ukrainian submarines extended the strike zone into Russia's rear. Cruise missiles cut across the water at nearly 550 miles per hour, flying low over terrain to avoid radar. Their targets were not soldiers in trenches, but the infrastructure keeping artillery supplied and commanders connected. Fuel depots, radar arrays, and command halls and support zones felt the impact. Convoys paused on roads, unsure if more missiles were coming, breaking the steady resupply line to the front. This second layer of strikes left Russian units stranded, their shells and fuel delayed or destroyed. Without logistics, the artillery pressure collapsed further. Air defenses tasked with intercepting incoming threats were caught trying to adjust, but that left gaps directly above the battlefield. Ukraine exploited those gaps with swarms of small drones. Dozens rose into the sky, each carrying explosives or tasked with distracting pilots. Russian aircraft scrambled to engage, but sensors and radars were already tied up by jamming, and defensive flights broke formation mid-battle. Pilots found themselves isolated against a buzzing mass of drones darting through. When these waves converged, the electronic blackout, the drone reconnaissance, the submarine-launched missiles, and the airborne swarms, the Russian forward base could no longer function.
Rescue workers say one person died and 26 were injured.
To end the conflict, his envoy, Steve Witkoff, is visiting Moscow today. Trump added that new sanctions could be imposed on Russia.
Command posts stopped sending orders. Ground troops had no cover fire. Aircraft had no clear skies. By nightfall, the once intimidating brigade looked stalled in place, unable to move forward or even organize a proper defense. Ukraine had not only paralyzed their opponent, they had done so without committing large ground forces into the meat of the fight. The silence over that base was not only the absence of artillery fire, but the collapse of command and control in every domain. A stronghold designed to drive momentum into Kharkiv had instead lost all coordination in less than one night. But what happened next in the aftermath changed not just the course of this fight, but Moscow's confidence in launching any large offensive again. Russia's offensive at Vovchansk collapsed because Ukraine struck across every domain at once. Command posts lost their links, artillery batteries lost supply, and aircraft lost safe skies. What looked like a powerful advance crumbled when the battlefield's land, sea, air, and electronic layers were pulled apart in one coordinated strike. This fight shows how victories now depend on integration, where a drone operator, a submarine crew, and a cyber team can shape the same battle. Wars are no longer decided by one branch alone. Let me know in the comments if other militaries can withstand this kind of hybrid assault.